And let me introduce who's going to be presenting today. So we're here to talk about AI and ChatGPT in the classroom. And I asked Michael Hansen, who's been a very loyal attendee of our chats, if he would lead our discussion today. And let me tell you a little bit about Michael. He's a teacher of high school math, AP statistics, and AP computer science at St. Albans School, which is an all-boys independent school in Washington, D.C. Michael's been teaching for 25 years, and before that, he spent 12 years working in the computer field as a Pentagon contractor. So I think Michael's pretty well versed to help us think about AI today. The other person that's with us today is one of my dear colleagues here in Georgia, Se-Young Holt. And Se-Young is the director of K-8 mathematics and statistics at the Northeast Georgia RESA. Those are our regional educational agencies here in Georgia. And she's actually currently serving as the president of the Georgia Council of Supervisors of Mathematics. Se-Young is just wonderful to watch as she delivers professional learning. And what I find so great about Se-Young is she's just passionate about helping teachers think about developing the mathematical and statistical minds of students. So with all of that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael, who's going to give you a short presentation, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A for questions that you might have. So Michael, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, can you all hear me okay? I'm using my computer audio. It's not a professional mic or anything like that. So let me make sure that I have the right version. I think that's the right version. And I'll go ahead and display this. Is it displaying? There we go. So I was lucky enough to be called upon to write an article. It's not really an article. There are no footnotes or research or references or anything like that. It's more like a listicle. But it appeared in the September issue of Amstat News. And I thought I would take the article and not read it to you, but give you some of the highlights. This is the article. And as you can see, there are 10 bullet points, things that I learned by working on a medium-sized programming project in June and July. It was about a 3,000-line Python program that I wrote for the school where I work over the summer, but I didn't really want to write it. That's a lot of code for me to write and debug. So I used ChatGPT to write the code for me. And in the process, I learned a lot about ChatGPT and a lot about myself and asked a bunch of questions about teaching. And before I get started for real, I wanted to give you a bonus that's not in the article. And this comes courtesy of one of my colleagues at the school who has been very adamant that every time we think of artificial intelligence, we should immediately say to ourselves, prompt engineer. And he's convinced that in the future, all white-collar employees, teachers included, will be prompt engineers. And by that, he means somebody who engineers prompts. So here's an example of a prompt that he wrote. African woman and full white wolf, cinematic, Dutch angle shot, candid shot, Norwegian nature, Hasselblad X1D, hip-hop aesthetics, realistic skin, natural features, snow punk, style raw, aspect ratio 16:9. 30 seconds later, this is what he got. And he started, as a joke, passing it off as a Calvin Klein ad. And quite a few people believed that it was a real Calvin Klein ad, but of course it's not. It's completely created from artificial intelligence. This was not ChatGPT. This was a different type of AI that was optimized for art generation. But it's pretty good. I think you'd have to admit the lips of the dog are a little weird. Those are not realistic, but the rest of the shot is in high resolution and it's very believable. And there was no travel required to Alaska or Norway. no hotel expense, no photographer, no model. The woman and the wolf are generated. They're not real. They're just generated by the AI. There was no Hasselblad involved. That's and no other gear for that matter. No makeup artist, no lighting design, nobody to handle the wolf, no royalties or residuals to any of the people involved. And if the client hates it, you can just spend another 30 seconds and generate something else. So this is a real game changer for the advertising industry, certainly. But actually, his point is, my colleague's point is that we're all going to be prompt engineers in the future. We're going to be leveraging the AI to do teaching or to do business or whatever it is that we're doing. We will all be prompt engineers. So he's trained me. Every time I hear AI, I just say to myself, prompt engineer. Here's the tour of the article, and instead of reading the article to you, I thought I'd just divide it into three sections. Um, I'll start with the things that I'm most familiar with and gradually taper off into things where I don't really know as much what I'm talking about. So the talk may start out good and then fade off into not so good. But anyway, here we go. It's a game changer, I think, for the teaching of computer science in particular. It's like having a junior programmer by your side, the best intern ever, who knows all the popular programming languages, has a very good memory, doesn't forget, knows all the programming patterns by heart. It means that coding is no longer central to teaching an introductory computer science class. And in fact, coding is no longer a barrier. People who have a good idea for producing an app can now just ask the AI to produce the app. You don't actually have to be a coder at all anymore. This means, of course, that for take-home assessments, they have to be completely scrapped or redone. And all of the exercises in my introductory programming text are easily solved by the AI, except for one. There's one that ChatGPT cannot handle, and so of course I'm going to make my students suffer through that. But all the rest, if they want to cheat, they can just go home and ask the AI to produce the answer, and it does. Debugging code is much simplified now, and I have to admit I have mixed feelings about this because I think that debugging is the single best way to learn about how computers work. And it is now literally the case that if you ask ChatGPT to debug the code for you, it does a pretty good job, and it's very, very fast. It's very accurate. However, some very difficult things remain. The hard part of computer science, it turns out, never was the coding. It was coming up with the detailed requirements, the requirements analysis, in other words, and then the detailed design. And ChatGPT helps some with this, but as of yet, this still remains difficult. And so that's what I'm focusing on in my teaching of computer science. And this summer, I thought I had a breakthrough. I realized, oh, I don't really need to teach them to code. I need to teach them how to write good pseudocode, because that's where the real thought is involved, is in writing pseudocode. And of course, if you know how to code, if you know how to write real code, writing pseudocode is easy. And so I thought that I was really onto something. But I'll have more to say about that a little later. And many of you know, of course, the difference between code and pseudocode. But for those who don't, I thought I'd just briefly show an example of some code in Java. This is a routine to figure out if a number is prime or is not prime. And then below, we have the same exact algorithm, but written out in English. And that's what we call pseudocode. It's much more readable below, but it has exactly the same logic and exactly the same steps. And if you give the pseudocode below to ChatGPT, it will produce the code that you see above. Or, unless you tell it differently, it'll actually call a built-in routine that checks for primality. So the students recently, when I gave this exercise, said, can't we just call the library function, Mr. Hansen? I said, well, yes, you can, but then you don't learn anything about the process of checking to see if a number is prime or not. So I think that the AI will be a game changer for teaching in general, and in particular for the teaching of statistics. I have started thinking a lot about this question about how students really learn. Do they learn by doing, or do they learn by ordering? And by ordering, I mean asking something to occur for them. And they're very good at ordering pizza. They're very good at ordering carryout. They do that all the time. And food appears, and it doesn't seem to bother them that they didn't prepare the food themselves. And but I think the answer to this question may be that both are important. You need to know how to do some things, and you need to know how to offload some other things. And the mix between what is done by the students and what is offloaded will change, just as it changed when calculators became widespread in the classroom. From a very practical point of view, I have to write all new grading rubrics, and I have to think about authentic assessments. If everybody in the future will be a prompt engineer, then maybe the authentic assessment is to ask for the prompt that gets the job done instead of the actual work. And going up just a little higher on the difficulty scale, I would say that if they really master the course material, they can be in the position of evaluating the tool itself. Is this explanation of the t-test or the chi-squared goodness of fit test, is this explanation that the AI is furnishing really correct enough? Or have they missed a few details here and there? And of course, the AI is not perfect. It does make mistakes from time to time. And I think that asking the students to critically evaluate what the AI produces may be still a very legitimate type of assignment to give them. A fun fact, I've been giving all of my assessments to ChatGPT, and it has a solid B+. And it is outscoring most of my students on the tests. And the only reason ChatGPT doesn't have an A is that its class participation grade is rather weak. The ChatGPT generates good test questions, so I don't have to write everything myself or use a test bank. I can actually just give it the subject area and say, write 5 questions on this topic and provide an answer key for me. The rubrics it provides are not very good. I still think I'm a better rubric writer than it is. But here's the thing that I referred to earlier. I was so convinced that getting my students to write good pseudocode would be the thing to focus on. Turns out ChatGPT writes excellent pseudocode. And when I discovered this, I was rather shocked and dismayed, because that means that we're peeling away more and more of what we used to consider to be human tasks. I think ChatGPT is going to be a game changer for everyone. And here's something I think everyone should know about it. It is interactive. If you're not happy with what it comes up with initially, just ask it to try again. A lot of my students don't know this, actually. They're used to using search engines where if their search string doesn't produce anything worthwhile, they'll try a different search string, or more often they'll just give up and say, I couldn't find anything. But with ChatGPT, if what it produces is not useful, just ask it to try again. And usually it will do better on the second or third try. And finally, one closing bonus is I used to tell my students, if you're not the customer, you're the product. And I thought that if I told them this, they might be a little less enamored of social media. But of course, that didn't work. They love their social media, and they're absolutely addicted to it. But now I tell them, if you're not adding more value than the AI alone, you have no job in the future, because nobody's going to pay you to copy and paste stuff from one place to another. You've got to come up with something, either being a really skillful prompt engineer or being a really skillful critical thinker who can analyze whether what the AI is producing is really appropriate in this case. And so that's what I'm stressing to my students constantly now. You have to find value that you can add that goes well beyond what the AI can do. And with that, I'm done. I'm gonna turn it over for Se-Young and some questions, and hopefully we can have a good discussion here.
Chris, do you want to jump in? I don't know what I can add to that, but I think what you mentioned, Michael, I think it really is applicable for all K-12, not just secondary, because one thing that I could add from my experience with the K-5, because it feels very out of K-5 world when you think about AI. Because why would we even think about AI in K-5 world where we're just barely learning mathematics, we're barely doing the foundations, so we don't, the teachers ourselves don't feel like we should even look into AI. So I think one thing that has been opening our eyes, and make us think more. I say us and we because I feel like I can really relate to K-5 teachers, is that when we hear AI, what comes to our mind is something that we have to confront ourselves first. So do we think about aliens invading the earth, like computers taking over the humanity kind of a thing? Or are we thinking about the technology that enhances the lives of us and that makes our work even more efficient in a way? So I really appreciate the way you phrased it as a prompt engineer and how teachers can use them for their professional learning as a communication tool, and also even help students creating more kind of a creative way of problem solving and creating the problems themselves rather than worrying about what if AI does all the homework for them. Then we need to ask about ourselves, what is our practice look like? So it has been really good conversation. It's still in Georgia, it's still kind of a new concept. So K-5 teachers are involved in the conversations a lot and kind of not having so much of a arms folded kind of attitude towards it, but more as in how could we use AI for us as teachers and also for our students? When the students, it's more first language for our students than for us. So how could we make it not to be an enemy of our teaching, but also help our students make their learning more enhanced? So that has been a conversation, and we can talk more as the conversation unfolds. Chris?
No, I was going to say, feel welcome to unmute yourself and just ask questions here. I actually have a question. I'll start it out. You know, I've been playing around with ChatGPT, and I mean, I'm truly amazed at what it can do. It's great at summarizing. That's one thing I've discovered. And so who needs Cliff Notes anymore? Just feed it something and it summarizes it for you. But I've thought about if I were teaching a class and I needed a quick lesson plan or a task for something I wanted to do in class, and I go to ChatGPT to try to give that to me instead of searching the internet. As a teacher, though, how are we going to be comfortable knowing if what I'm getting from ChatGPT is really something I should be using in the class? Is it statistically correct or mathematically correct? So how do we help teachers utilize ChatGPT to help them prepare for their classes, but at the same time, as Michael was saying, with his students, being able to critique it and actually see if this is correct? I'm thinking about the peer review process.
Can I jump in? Interestingly, we are doing proofs in geometry, and the other geometry teacher and I asked ChatGPT to write a proof for quadrilaterals that we could just look at and see how ChatGPT would write a proof, because we didn't know, so we kind of gave it some constraints. The proof it wrote had some issues because it later on in the proof, it assumed that the points that it put on the sides of the square were midpoints, but that was not part of the given. And so what we did was gave the proof to our students to critique and go through. And a lot of students are like, we don't know that it's the midpoint, but ChatGPT thinks it is. So it either didn't put it in the given or, didn't say where they had to go. So I thought it was a great use of ChatGPT that way for kids to analyze and think about, how their proofs look compared to what they got as a product.
That actually it speaks to like 4th and 5th grade geometry too. A lot of times, like, trapezoid, for example, in quadrilaterals, and there's still very hazy definition of trapezoid in elementary level. And a lot of teachers still think about, trapezoid as only one set of parallel lines and all those things. So talk about the inclusive definition of trapezoid. And we did have a conversation about what if you asked ChatGPT and students just looked up and what it is, and versus what they understand about trapezoid, and then what do they understand about the criteria to be a certain category, and it's kind of open up the mind of classroom, so that it's not, the practice of teaching is not just about right or wrong, and it's about, you have a conjecture, you have a claim. How do we have a conversation to judge that and come to the conclusion, so it becomes more of a discourse-based classroom. So I think it's a good way to utilize that.
Yeah, I was always under the impression that a trapezoid in Great Britain used the inclusive definition and in America used the restrictive definition, but then Common Core changed all of that. And so luckily, I teach at a school that's off the grid, so to speak. We don't have to worry about Common Core. But yeah, that's a good discussion to have. Actually, any sort of debate over definitions can be fruitful. And critiquing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, critiquing what the AI assumes in certain situations. That sounds terrific to me.
I'm speaking from Georgia's perspective, but with the new standards revision, we are really trying to promote integrated learning and interdisciplinary learning. So I'm doing a lot of professional learning on problem-based learning and project-based learning type of things. And one thing that I thought ChatGPT could be helpful, or any other AI could be helpful, is that we have a scenario. So I do a lot of Monarch project-based kind of a project-based learning with the mathematics, but we have a scenario, we have a situation or some interest, and students need to build up background knowledge in order to solve problem or to get engaged in some sort of project. And I think it really is helpful to have ChatGPT, hey, I want to learn more about blank. And so the students can get first-hand information or the secondary information or even statistics and data about certain things, so they can build their background knowledge in a very efficient way. So that's something that the teachers who participated in the professional learning found that to be useful. I'm curious though, teachers out there in especially middle school, I don't know if anyone here have middle school grade band with experiences. Or any others who are using AI. Or perspectives, maybe. Yes, I think Peter wanted to say something.
No, sorry, I was just at a math conference. I'm at a math conference and I was waiting for someone.
That's
Do you find that a teacher at your particular schools, are certain teachers starting to incorporate AI, ChatGPT, or are you having any discussions at your schools? Is this like a school-wide discussion about how ChatGPT or AI may influence the classroom teaching?
My school
Well,
is doing quite a bit of PD on like how to use it, how to write lesson plans with it. Like we're spending quite a bit of time, our instructional coaches, spending about an hour to 2 hours a month with the staff on best practices, how to grade with it, how to check to see if kids are using it, how to use it appropriately. So I think it's on radar.
To say it's on radar with us. It hasn't actually been incorporated yet. I think there's still a lot of fear and almost a little anger on the parts of the teachers that they can't continue to teach the way they used to teach.
Yeah, at the school where I teach, there's a working group, and we've had a lot of meetings and discussions, and policy is being left mostly to the discretion of individual teachers. But one policy that's been put in place is binding on the teachers, and we are not allowed to use ChatGPT to generate any comments that go to parents or any letters of recommendations that go to colleges. And it is so tempting to use ChatGPT as a shortcut there, because ChatGPT is a great wordsmith. When I was just beginning to use ChatGPT, I thought, can I make up a person and have ChatGPT write a convincing elegy or encomium for his funeral? And the answer is yes. It's used all the words. You know, he'll be missed by all the many people. And I provided a few details, and then ChatGPT just generated everything else, made up a whole life about this person, and I thought to myself, well, there's a line of work that humans don't have any need to spend time on, which is for the minister to write a personalized homily for somebody's funeral. ChatGPT will generate the whole thing, lock, stock, and barrel.
And the one thing that really hit me, what you said there, was that if you're not adding more value than the AI alone, you have no job. That I copied that. I'm like, I am definitely sharing that with my kids. I thought that really hit home.
Absolutely. And I think it connects back to the teaching too. If your homework or any assignment can be done, and if your grading comes from that, and the students can answer everything using ChatGPT, that means maybe the assignment itself is not useful for them.
Well, as an assignment, I think I would agree with you there, Se-Young. But one assessment type that I'm going to continue using is fill in the blank, because especially in statistics and data science, which I also teach a class in, the terminology and notation are a real big part of fluency in the subject.
Right.
And so I'm going to continue to use fill in the blank as a way of gauging student fluency. But ChatGPT is a conditional probability engine. It knows exactly what goes in the next blank. That's how it was built from day one. And so ChatGPT gets 100% on all of the fill in the blank assessments.
Absolutely. Yeah. I guess what I'm trying to say is that if the ChatGPT can do the work for students, and students don't have to think beyond that,
oh, right,
then it'll
exactly.
be ChatGPT doing the work and not as necessarily doing the thinking. So you know, the good teaching will include more thinking beyond that.
Right. We wouldn't be training them for the future. We'd be training them for the past that no longer exists.
Kind of an assembly line, what used to be, you know.
So if I can y'all hear me? Not sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Y'all have already been talking about some of these things, but I just keep going back to, in pre-service teacher education, what is it that we need to be preparing our pre-service teachers for? You know, what are the things, and it's connected to ChatGPT, but it goes beyond that, because they'll be teaching over the next 10, 15 years, I hope, maybe longer, and things will definitely change. So what are the key things we need to help them with in thinking about their future of teaching? And as you said, it changes assessment, it changes what you teach, it changes questions that you should ask, it gets more at that critiquing and those kind of things. But anyway, so it's something that here in our department that I'm trying to get a handle on how we can think about that, so that we make sure that collectively we're addressing it in ways that are going to support our students. So
Mm.
So Michael, have you ever asked a student, have you ever asked ChatGPT to critique a response that was generated by ChatGPT?
Not yet. I've asked ChatGPT to critique student responses, and some of its critiques are really very good, very on the money. And I've asked ChatGPT to generate tests subject to general guidelines. I'll say write a practical test that's suitable for a beginning data science student that does blah 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 with a notebook that contains this and that and the other thing. And when I compare my own practical test against what ChatGPT has produced, I say there's no objective criteria by which I could say mine is better. But no, I haven't turned it. I haven't inverted it on itself and asked it to critique. I think I'm going to try that tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, I was just wondering if it,
try.
I was just wondering if it thinks its responses are perfect. And because if we're asking, one of the things we might ask students to do is to critique a ChatGPT response. What would happen if they just turned around and went back to ChatGPT?
Well, one
to do
thing
the
they're going to
same
have trouble mimicking is ChatGPT's overconfident tone. When you ask ChatGPT, this was in the article. I didn't mention it in the slideshow, but when you ask ChatGPT something, even if it's dead wrong, it comes back with the most confident statement. And then you tell it, no, that's not right. Try again. And it'll say, I'm so sorry. You're right. I did not take into account this. And then it'll come up with something else that's usually better. But sometimes it gets stuck in a loop where it just keeps feeding you baloney over and over again. And so if the students sound overly confident and get caught in a do loop of baloney, that's going to be my dead giveaway that they're speaking with their own voice.
Is that what they call hallucinations? When it starts hallucinating, when it gets caught in those loops?
I think so. I mean, the term hallucination in the readings I've done is often applied to the making up of stuff from whole cloth, like that funeral homily I told you about. I only gave a few details about my made-up person. You know, his name, his age, a couple of his friends, his occupation, and asked ChatGPT to spin a homily, and it just went for it. It just made up stuff. But of course, I had told it to make up stuff. What's really disconcerting is that a lot of the stuff it makes up are in situations where it shouldn't be making things up, especially in statistics. I don't want it making up things that don't add up. It is getting better with the algebra. Surprisingly, a lot of the points that ChatGPT was losing in the spring were just bonehead algebra mistakes. It's getting better now, though. They've hooked up ChatGPT to Wolfram Alpha, so it has a better algebra engine now.
Here's a comment from Jed saying that when he's experimenting with ChatGPT for lesson planning, it's tended to suggest and reference non-existent articles.
That would definitely be hallucinating.
I actually have been able to observe my husband this semester using ChatGPT. He's retired, but he still teaches a doctoral class for the College of Public Health here at the University of Georgia. And his students in this class tend to be like CDC workers from Atlanta, hospital CEOs. These are people coming back to school, you know, to get an advanced degree. And he decided he was going to just embrace ChatGPT in his course, which has created quite a bit of work for him, but I think he's enjoyed it. I think he said out of all the students, only 2 had even heard of it at the beginning of the semester, but he's actually been given assignments weekly assignments where they use ChatGPT. And he gives them, for example, he gives them scenarios to where they go and try to do research with ChatGPT. And what he's doing is when they come back to class, he actually has them compare the questions that they ask GPT and the answers that they're getting from ChatGPT. And I've been watching this and I've been thinking, geez, I could come up with some great statistics activities with this about the precision of how you ask your questions with different scenarios or situations that you're trying to explore. But he has found it to be quite refreshing, he said. It's been like a new challenge for him to think about how to draw the students out to, as you say, critique, to reason, not where they're just memorizing facts from the textbook. So that's been his experience.
Well, it sounds as if he's done some very interesting work there. I do think it's funny that as much as we complain about ChatGPT hallucinating, the students do more hallucinating than ChatGPT. The first few times I used ChatGPT to help me get my work done, I was just astonished at how accurate it is. Yes, you do have to double check it, but that would always be the case if you're doing technical work. But it just is such a labor saving for not just for implementing code, but for producing answer keys, solution keys. And yeah, they need a little editing, a little cleanup, but it's pretty impressive.
Well,
I
oh, go ahead.
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, give an anecdote. A friend of mine, Beth Chance, and I, when ChatGPT first came out, and we were saying, so how good is this? And so we sat down, and I said, I gave the query, just what is Roxy Peck known for? And it came back with some stuff that was right. It gave me some awards that I've never received. I was very happy to hear about those, and I hadn't figured out where to go claim them. But it was just this weird mix. And then we said, what is Beth Chance known for? And one of the things that she was known for was writing one of my books. And we think it's because she's mentioned in the dedication. Her name appears in that book, but it said she was the author of, so it's really, I think it's improved since then. This was maybe 6 months ago, but it was interesting to see what it thought, what I thought I was known for, but and to see what it got right and what it got wrong.
Roxy, my son decided he was going to ask ChatGPT to summarize my textbook. And so he came back and showed me what ChatGPT said, and I read it and I go, wow, this is really on the money. This is really good. And then the more I read it, I said, this sounds familiar. Well, it was mostly the preface from the textbook that my co-author and I had written. I thought, oh, that's why it seems to be on the money.
That's funny. I keep going back to what Trina asked about, how do we help our preschool and pre-service teachers, and also in-service teachers. Really, I think the questions that I feel like we need to ask ourselves a lot is that what do we want out of AI, and what's the relationship between the AI and human problem solving and creativity, and what kind of a problem solving do we want our students to be able to do? Is it problem solving as in just answering what is, who is kind of question, or are we using those information to create something and to solve more authentic problem? So I think the more our tasks are authentic and that's real world problem solving, like not as in like real world situation where we make up word problem, but really situational thing that we want to solve some genuine problems around us, I think we could use information from AI or whatever summaries or whatever information that they give us, but we can use that, but also using our creativity to do some problem solving. I think the more we have some serious need for that kind of mind in the world anyway. So I just feel like we need to ask, what do we really want? What do we want from AI? What do we understand about AI? What is it? What can it do? What can it not do? How do we interact with it?
If I could, I'd like to share an anecdote from a former student of mine who's now working in the field of AI. He's actually an app builder in AI. And I asked him about Moore's Law, which I think probably several of you have heard about. Moore's Law is the observation that computer capability grows exponentially with the doubling rate somewhere between 18 months and 24 months, depending on whom you ask. Anyway, I said to him, well, if the AI follows Moore's Law, in 15 years, we'll have AI that's 1,000 times more powerful than the AI of today. And he said, I don't think so. I said, really? He said, the progress that has been made recently in these generative AI engines is based on digesting huge amounts of human-produced information. And human-produced information is not growing according to Moore's Law. And I said, oh, so you think we're close to peak AI? And he said, no, we're not at peak AI yet, but we're not going to have exponential growth, is what he was saying. And I thought, well, that's an interesting take on it that I had not considered before, that it'll grow, it'll continue to get more powerful, but it won't be like the iPhone, which is literally 1,000 times more powerful than the original iPhone from 2007. So I just thought I'd share that.
Well, it seems
I have
to
a
me
question.
that one advantage that we have over AI is we can be creative. It seems like that AI is so dependent upon what humans create. So we have that leg on AI.
Well, but that's also the scary part. Is that
That's true.
I'm not so sure I want it learning from us. But anyway, I feel like I cut off Robin before earlier and I wanted to get back to her.
That's okay. I'm just listening more than anything because I know a little bit. We're learning a little bit at our in-service tomorrow, but I've not actually ever worked with it. My daughter actually wrote a speech for forensics last year about it, but that's my knowledge. So one of my questions as people are discussing is, we talk about how it's inaccurate and how we have to look at things. Is there still a base knowledge that we need to be teaching our kids so that they know it's inaccurate? Or if we are just teaching them to use it, will they recognize those things that we will because we've learned other methods? That's kind of my question on it. And then one of the other things is, what's the chance that if a paper cites an article that doesn't exist and now someone cites that paper, are we going to have this loop of misinformation somewhere? Those are kind of my questions looking from the outside because I haven't done much with it yet.
It seems like fact checking is a skill that's needed to kind of go alongside ChatGPT and other tools like that.
And we do that with the internet too. Kids are not very good at looking at Google and finding what's good and what's not. And is it kind of the same way, or is this a totally different? Again, I'm coming at it from not having any experience. I'm just trying to learn about it. So.
I mean, it's kind of the same thing because ChatGPT is getting its information from the sources that Google is using when you search things. And so things that are out there that aren't correct are being integrated and used by ChatGPT. We were, wondering the other day about how many of us would have to get online and post something that said something like, Michael Hansen, was arrested for murder in Chicago in 1984. And how many of us would have to get on before it started showing up when you would ask things like, what's Michael Hansen known for? Oh, well, he, so that to me, that's the part that's scary. I mean, that's the part that's scary, is that it's just learning, it's pulling in everything that we put out there. So it kind of perpetuates prejudices and biases that are out there. And people kind of take them as, if they take it as truth without questioning it, like, Robin suggested. So to me, it seems like alongside teaching how to use it, we need to teach how to question it, and to think carefully about what it's returning. But
If I remember correctly, there actually was a study done early on that somebody kept trying to feed it bad information until it actually started regurgitating it. So, and they actually took the AI down for a while to fix that problem.
And that just it just kind of makes us think more about like what kind of mindset do we promote in the classroom? Is it about just right or wrong answer? Is it about the accuracy only, or is it about reasoning behind it? And are we using information for information's sake, or are we using information to tell the story that we want to tell or create something? I think that kind of takes the ownership of what we do and what we use. And I think NCTM had was it a chat or article by somebody from Kentucky, Donnie somebody, I cannot remember, Donnie P. And he shared how he's using AI in his classroom. And I thought some of the examples that he gave were pretty good, in a sense that it is supporting students' creativity and what they do. And so using AI as a tool for creativity, but not as a creativity itself.
It was a webinar.
Okay.
And the recording is there now. And I want to say that was one that anybody can access, but I'd have to go and look.
Okay.
But it was a webinar, and he's a high school teacher, I believe, or classroom teacher.
I cannot remember. Yes, classroom teacher for sure.
Yeah. And and he just used a lot of examples of how he's used it and some of the drawbacks and things like that. Yeah.
So more thoughts, questions?
I'm going to be presenting a version of this slideshow to our school soon. And as I mentioned earlier, we have this working group at the school that's taking AI very seriously. And it'll be very interesting to see what kinds of questions shake out of that, because they have a lot of heavy hitters, serious thinkers from all fields who are going to weigh in. So if something interesting shakes out of that conversation, I'll shoot it to Christine, and maybe she can mention it at a future chat.
Really good. Have any of your schools, like Michael or any of the others, has there been discussions with parents?
Oh,
about
yes.
these?
Yeah. We have.
What's been reactions of parents?
Fear, that's the number one reaction. Concern. I think it's fear of the unknown. How is the school going to respond? There have been some publicized cases of false positives on AI detection software, and we had to reassure that the parents that we weren't going to employ AI detection software, because with any classification like that, you're going to have false positives, false negatives, and as I said, there have been some publicized cases of people being accused of using AI inappropriately for class projects, and in fact they didn't. They just happened to have stuff that was flagged by the AI detector as being likely produced by AI. Essentially, it's undetectable. That's the real problem for traditional classroom essays and traditional take-home assignments, is that the AI produced stuff is, it doesn't leave a trace. You're not going to find those special oddball combinations of words that would flag plagiarism. I mean, if I see a student in an essay say something like, through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come, I would immediately accuse him of plagiarizing Amazing Grace, because I mean, where else would you find that phrase anywhere? And in most student writing, you can find a couple of words that are, you know, a little bit unique, a little bit unusual, and but the stuff produced by AI leaves no trace because it doesn't exist. It's newly generated. I have a very boring name because my first name is common, my last name is common. It allows me to hide on the internet. The last thing I would want to do is have a unique name so that people could start creating false personas for me that would be easily picked up. I mean, in my town alone, there are a dozen or more people with my name, so I can hide on the internet.
So a response about being traceable, untraceable. One thing that a lot of our English teachers are doing is requiring students to write their assignments in a single Google Doc. Because a lot of students, and of course, savvy students will figure out a way around this, but a lot of students will just get ChatGPT to write an essay. They'll copy and paste it. So then if you go to the version history in Google Doc, you'll see 3 pages show up in 30 seconds. And no human can write 3 pages of text in 30 seconds. So we've caught several students that way. Of course, now, you know, the students are going to get smart enough to print it and then retype it. So they'll have ways around that. But that's one way we've detected a few. And we're at a school. I'm also at an independent school. We have an honor code. I'm actually the faculty member in charge of the honor council. So I've had to deal with a lot of this and the parents on that side of things. And yeah, I would say the same thing about the parents. There's concern. Most of them are understanding that if we know or get an admission that students have used ChatGPT to write a paper for them, that's not really what the point of the assignment was, and they're supportive. But yeah, we've had to be careful about the false positives. Also, I put, when we were first looking at this, I put a letter of recommendation that I had written to a student in one of the detectors, and I did it paragraph by paragraph. And the first paragraph was 98% likely to be fake. When I added the second paragraph, which was more about how a student actually did in my class, it was still at something like 86%. After the third paragraph, it dropped to 3%. But 2 solid paragraphs that the detector was 86% certain that I had done with ChatGPT before I had ever heard of it was concerning.
Any other thoughts, questions? Well, we are about at the end of the hour. I want to thank Michael and Se Young very much for joining us today and leading this discussion. I feel like I learned a lot today. Thank you. And definitely, Michael, or anyone else, if you have comments, things you want to share about AI and ChatGPT in your schools, just send me an email or send Rebecca or Roxy an email, and we will definitely bring that up at some of our future chats. Okay. Anything else? Well, thank you for joining us today, and we will let you know when we have our next chat. Have a
Thank
good
you.
evening.
Hey, everybody.